Hi, this is Cora Stack here. I just wanted to do something that I thought might be useful as well, because there's a huge interest in my previous article on this with regard to understanding the Irish Constitution just written in plain language, no substitute for, it's not legal advice or anything. So it's just trying to get, like a lot of these languages is written in so difficult language that a lot of people don't know their rights. So this might help. I mean, I'm sure all the students that are currently looking at my new understanding of the Irish Constitution might benefit from this. But it's not just for students, it's for citizens as well. So title, Understanding Your EU Rights Explained in Plain Language. And it's formatted and edited by myself, Dr. Cora M Stack, using AI tools. So I'm Dr. Cora M Stack, and in this short video we'll explore how your European Union rights, what they mean in plain everyday language, because like it's very difficult, because a lot of it is in all legalese language, and it's the preserve of the few rather than the many. I'm sure it's not meant that way, but it unfortunately, it can come across that way as a little bit, inaccessible. Whether you're a student, a teacher, or simply someone who cares about democracy and fairness, this video is for you. It's for myself as well, since I'm one of those. Let's look at the laws that protect your freedom, dignity, equality, and voice across all EU countries. We hear this night and day, but do we really know what they are? First of all, your basic rights. That's referred to as the EU Charter. The EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. Now, it's great to have rights. The hardest thing is to get accessibility to courts to get that right. So rights are nothing unless you can actually get them, get access to justice, to have your rights respected or adjudicated on. So this is a major issue. Rights are just rights on paper, but unless you have access to justice and affordable access to justice, in some kind of way, I feel there's a major gap here that should be addressed by the EU. But anyway, we won't get into that. That's another day's work. The EU Charter, that in itself should be a right, the right to access to justice, affordable justice. The EU Charter of Fundamental Rights is like Europe's own Bill of Rights. It sets out the freedoms every person in the EU has. The right to life, safety, equality, and fair treatment. It covers 6 big areas. So, dignity, freedoms, equality, solidarity, citizens' rights, and my favourite, justice. In shortage, no matter who you are or where you live in the EU, you are protected by law against discrimination, abuse, and unfair treatment. Plain words, these rights mean you can live with dignity, speak freely, and be treated as an equal in every EU country. Now, is that the case in Ireland today? That's the question. Democracy doesn't stop at your border. If you live in another EU country, you can vote and stand for election in local and European Parliament elections there. That's part of Directive 93/109/EC and 94/AO/EC. And under the European Citizens Initiative, if 1 million people from 7 EU countries support an idea, the European Commission must listen. So under the European Citizens Initiative, if 1 million people from seven in total EU countries support an idea, the European Commission must listen. An example, an Irish student in Spain can vote in Spanish local elections and the EU elections too. How many of us knew that? Fairness and equality for everyone. EU makes discrimination illegal, full stop. You cannot be treated unfairly because of your race, religion, age, disability, gender, or sexual orientation. The EU also guarantees equal pay for equal work. These laws apply in the workplace, in education, in housing, and in public services. Everyone deserves an equal chance. Your opportunities, plain words, your opportunities should depend on your ability, not your background or your gender. That sounds like meritocracy. In other words, not who your connections are. Protection and justice for victims. If you're a victim of a crime, EU law protects you. You must be treated with respect, kept informed, and given support. Say that again. If you're the victim of a crime, You must be treated with respect, kept informed, and given support. If you have a protection order, it applies across all borders. Your safety doesn't stop at the airport. So we'll give that. Ending violence and exploitation, very important. The EU takes violence and exploitation very seriously. A new 2022 directive fights domestic violence, sexual assault and online harassment. Another law bans human trafficking, giving real help to victims, including housing, medical care and protection. Violence is not a private matter. It is a human rights matter, in particular domestic violence. It's not a private matter, it's a human rights issue. Everyone deserves safety and respect online and offline. Your data, your control. Your personal data belongs to you, not to companies or governments or to people who manipulate records in order to create a false narrative about you, which can often happen, as happened, for example, it often happens with whistleblowers and people like that. If someone misuses your data, you can report it and demand action. So that's very important. If somebody misuses your private data, you can report it and demand action. Now, I'd like to see a time frame for that action to be deliverable. A little more other EU rules. So that's important about the GDPR. You can correct, right? Under GDPR, you can see, correct, or delete your information at any time. If someone misuses your data, or it's been manipulated to misuse it, or it's been falsely misused under the GDPR regulations, you can report it and demand action. That's very important that we understand that. Other EU rules like the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act make online life, that's the idea, fair and safe since we're all. The new AI Act ensures that artificial intelligence respects human rights and transparency. That's excellent. So there's a new AI Act which ensures that artificial intelligence has to respect human rights and transparency. That's excellent. And the Whistleblower Directive protects people who speak up about wrongdoing. Control your data, protect your privacy, speak up fairly. Is that all going on in Ireland? Let's see. Freedom to move, work and study. One of the EU's greatest achievements is free movement. You can live, work and study in any EU country without visas or barriers. If your country has no embassy abroad, you can get help from any other EU embassy. An Irish tourist in Argentina can ask help at a German or French embassy if no Irish one is nearby. The right to a clean environment. This is section 8 of this video. The EU recognises that a healthy environment is a human right. You can ask your local council or national authority for information about pollution, water quality or planning projects. They are legally required to answer under the Environmental Information Directive. Now, a concern about this is that there are kind of serial objectors who may use this to object to everything, that's not in their own area, particularly housing and that. When we have a housing crisis, I'm not sure whether this is used as an objective, but I could see how it might be vexatiously used, when there's a housing crisis, if there wasn't, you could say, but I'm not sure about that. But sometimes you hear about all these things being used when there's dire need for more housing. Across all 27 EU countries, these rights supposedly protect your freedom, your dignity, and your democracy. That's what they're supposed to do. Now, are governments compliant with these rights, regulations? That's the other question. And how often are they audited for compliance? They remind every government that power belongs to the people, not to the systems. How often are all these rights audited for compliance by the auditing people in the EU? That's something I actually don't know, but I'd be interested in doing, because particularly with regard to whistleblowing, how often is whistleblowing audited? The whistleblowing rights audited for compliance. Or is it just left to their own countries? Sure. So learn your rights, use them, share them, and never be afraid to stand up for them. Your rights, your e-rights, are your everyday rights, and that's my final my final. I'm Dr. Cora M. Thank you for watching, and remember, knowledge is protection, and understanding your rights is the first step to reading them, to using them. Yeah. So there's just even myself. But that's a really brief summary. But there's a paper up on academia.eu, which is far more comprehensive than this, but it just gives you your rights, the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, just a summary of that, and then the various directives. And in particular, what I'd be interested in is the compliance. How often are all these are all kind of overriding rights, which are now part of every country's rights that are members of EU citizens, and how are they actually implemented in practice, and how are our countries compliant with the Charter and with the EU directives. It's clear to me that this is very problematic in the current Irish Protective Disclosures Act as amended. It's just reading it here very, very clear. I've kind of highlighted that in several cases. So we're evading our rights, to suit our own problems. The Irish solution to the Irish problem. So